Everybody, and welcome to Bread Ideas. So today I wanted to talk a little bit about the ways that I've learned to build stronger relationships with the external partners that I've worked with over the years. Um, and I think, the key word here is that partner. I've worked with a lot of companies over the years, and the ones that really stood out were the contacts who I consider a true partner, because those are the people that went above and beyond, from being just a functional acquaintance in my day-to-day work. So what I'd like to share are the key components that I've picked up throughout my experiences that I believe really define the idea of creating that true partnership. So first, and this really goes without saying, but it really comes down to mutual respect. I've had the fortunate opportunity to start out my career on the research agency side when I first got into this industry. And then I moved over to client side and worked for a number of years at a couple of companies. And now I'm back on the agency side. And having that experience of seeing the world from both sides really humbled me, because I could empathize with the key objectives that my counterparts were working towards, regardless of which side I was on. So end of the day, we're all here to do a job, and no one is better than the other. We just have different roles. So regardless of which side you work on, it should never change the fact that we need to treat each other with respect. You got to remember, the market research industry is a very small world, and people are moving from company to company all the time. So since you never really know who you may end up working with down the road, there's really no room for burning bridges in this business. I also believe that you need to make information sharing a two-way street, because I think you'll both be collectively stronger when there's a common understanding of the business challenges at hand. So now, don't get me wrong. I've definitely had situations where I've been more guarded with my data when I was on the client side, especially if it's proprietary data. Obviously you're not going to share that, but to get the most out of your relationship, the right partner should be valued as if they're an extension of the team, and you should try to find a good balance of information sharing between the two organizations. And if you do it right, they can become your trusted advisor, and they can help you think through those tougher challenges. So in my experience, having that open dialogue almost always led to a more strategic and actionable outcome for both sides. So it was a win-win scenario for us. You should also focus on the value of the relationship and not just the value of the transaction. And what I mean by that is, yeah, I get it. On the agency side, you're trying to sell something, you're trying to build your business, and that's totally understandable. But there needs to be a human element to all of this too. I would always recommend using your time at the beginning of calls to get to know them as a person, find out about their hobbies. Do they have pets? What sports do their kids play? And you might find there's actually some commonalities that you both share. And, quite honestly, doesn't it make for a more interesting conversation if you could start every discussion getting an update from each other on how things are going in their personal lives? I really think it does. I also think that's why the frequency at which you check in is so important when you're trying to build these relationships with partners. If you're only reaching out every 3 to 4 months to talk, then it's almost as if you're starting from scratch every time, and it starts to come off as a little less genuine. So you want to make sure that those check-ins are more of a routine, and schedule those out well in advance so you don't lose any of that momentum. And don't shy away from being a brand advocate for them too. You could do that in a number of ways. You can provide testimonials for their business, or you can share, and comment on their social media posts on LinkedIn, for instance. This is a great way to establish that ongoing relationship by helping to promote their business. And if you're on the agency side, at times I found it could also be beneficial to partner with another agency where there's a common goal. So for instance, we had a situation where we had a client ask if we'd work with another company, and we actually strengthened our relationship with them because we were willing to partner with another brand who happened to be in somewhat of an indirect competitive space. Now, this isn't always going to work, but it was a situation where each of our services were complementary to each other. And when we combined, we were able to provide an enhanced service to the client that neither one of us could have done on our own. So end of the day, each of our companies together created a more successful outcome. And on top of that, the client was so happy with the project that it ended up with us getting an expansion opportunity with them. So it was great. Another thing I've learned for helping building these relationships out is to practice listening. So you're going to want to differentiate between hearing and listening. And what I mean by that, so by definition, hearing is more of a passive intake of the conversation at hand. So ultimately, what you're probably doing is just waiting to talk and not really picking up on the cues that they're telling you. But listening is when you intentionally work to comprehend the words that they're saying. And it's pretty amazing what you can learn when you really listen. So I've always said that when writing a questionnaire, you should put your consumer hat on and think about, how would I react if I was the person taking this survey as a respondent? And the same goes for these partnerships. If you can think of what it may be like to walk a day in their shoes, or the amount of projects they have on their to-do lists, or the different teams that they're supporting internally and externally, you can start to empathize with their current situation. So make sure you're always listening. Another thing to keep in mind, sometimes the initial challenges that your partners first start talking about may be just the tip of the iceberg, and the true issues that they're dealing with still lie underneath. So again, if you're really listening to their challenges and continue to probe in the right areas, you might find that their needs are completely different from what you originally thought. And that could allow you to adapt your part of the conversation better. So for instance, I've seen situations where it started out as a very surface level conversation around wanting to bring on new tools that they can help enhance presentations. Okay, that's fine, we can do that. But we probed a bit further and we found that the real issue was that they were trying to increase their stakeholder engagement in order to get a seat at the leadership table. That's a big difference. And it definitely took us to a much more emotional level in the conversation. So by having those discussions, your counterpart will become a lot more receptive and interested in what you're saying because you truly comprehend their current situation. So that just leads to more interesting dialogue between both of you. Something else I want to make sure I point out, we've all heard the saying, honesty is the best policy. And at some point, you're going to be put in a situation where you have tough news to share. Let's say there was a mistake made or something happened, and you have to share that with your partners. And you need to have the courage and confidence to be transparent and talk openly about those issues from the start. So trying to skirt around the truth will almost always come back to bite you. And in turn, it's going to hurt that relationship you've been trying to build. So instead, be proactive. Try to determine a solution and present that to them immediately. And by being upfront, honest, and realistic with your counterparts, they're going to have a much higher respect for you and for the partnership. And look, throughout this process, there's always the possibility that you may run into other roadblocks. So for instance, do you have business values that your company follows? Or do you have personal values that you live by? Make sure you're staying true to those. You have to be willing to give up business if those values ever come into question. So for instance, one of my personal values is integrity. It's really important to me. And I live that value day in and day out. And if there's ever a situation where I feel like that value is being compromised, then it's time for me to either speak up or move on. And then finally, just like you would do in a research project, it's a good idea to determine what you both feel will be the success criteria of this relationship. Have that discussion early on and document it in a statement of work. So it's really clear what measures you'll be using as an assessment for this relationship. By having that frequent and open communication with candid expectations and feedback, you're bound to set yourself up for success in the future. Well, I hope this was helpful, and I wish you luck in building those successful partnerships. Before I sign off, I always like to give my own personal life hack, if anything, to just hopefully make your lives a little bit easier. So if you're like me, you love a good fire pit, especially this time of year when there's still some cooler nights and there's a little chill in the air. But inevitably, you're going to run into a situation where you don't have any kindling and the fire just won't start. So what you may not have known is that tortilla chips make a great kindling to get that fire going. So the next time you're in a bind, go get those Cool Ranch Doritos and give it a try. That's it for me, and we'll see you next time.